This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM radio. Today, my guest is Dr. Pessy Krausz. Pessy was with me on January the 30th, and I think you would all really enjoy listening to her previous podcast. So please have a look under High FM, Finding Human podcasts, and look for Pessy Krausz. It's spelled Krausz, and you'll find it there. And if you want to see Pessy herself, go onto Dr. Les Glassman's YouTubes, and you'll see Pessy and her photographs as well, which are really worth seeing. Pessy, today I'm actually going to call our session today. Our topic is Touched by a Heavenly Hand, because I think your story, you wrote the story, Touched by a Heavenly Hand, but in actual fact, your whole story of how you came to Israel is all touched by a heavenly hand. So that's what I would like to call our topic. Just let me tell you a bit about Pessy. She grew up and was educated in England. She fled Germany as a small child with her parents. She was married with 3 sons, trained as a social worker and organization development consultant. She made Aliyah with her family in 1975 and was working for the Ministry of Welfare and Social Work and in Jerusalem. She has a PhD in psychology and management consultant. She is a writer. You can pick up a lot of her writing on the Ezra website, or look under Pessy Krausz, and you will see her. Pessy, last time you were on, you sang, and our listeners loved it. And I came across this shamanic quote. It said, in many shamanic societies, if you came to a medicine person complaining of being disheartened, dispirited, or depressed, they would ask you one of 4 questions. When did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? And when did you stop being enchanted by stories? When did you stop being comforted by the sweet territory of silence? That's from Gabriella Roth. And I think you would have done very well in the shamanic societies.
Yes.
How are you today, Pessy?
Baruch Hashem. All the better for seeing you, Sue. You look so lovely. And you've got that beautiful ring with a sort of a lovely blue stone that goes with everything that you're wearing. So,
and you're in my favorite color. You're in a pale lilac. I love it.
Yes, thank you.
Pessy, tell me a little bit about the last time we spoke. We actually ended up in the Isle of Man, but I would like you just to take us back a little bit to how your mother got you onto a boat at Dunkirk.
Oh, well, all right. That's a story of remarkable resilience, which is actually a word which I have learned during this terrible war that we're going through at the moment. The word is chosen, and it means resilience. And I, of course, I didn't speak Hebrew at that time when we were fleeing from Germany to Belgium and finally got to the beaches of Dunkirk. But I think that resilience was really what saved us. So I think that I have mentioned that on Kristallnacht as a baby, my parents rushed upstairs to non-Jewish neighbors who were persuaded to hide us in a clothes cupboard as the Nazis were banging on the doors, screaming, "Alle Juden raus," all the Jews out. And so they knocked on these non-Jewish neighbors' door, and they said, "Wo sind die Markoviches? Where is our family called Markovich?" And these neighbors were very brave because they risked their lives if I, as a baby, would have cried. But they stood in the doorway, cool as anything, and they said, "Oh, the Markovich family, they left long ago." And apparently the stormtrooper Nazis who had been breaking all the windows, in the schuls and the houses and so on, stood there wondering, should they go and inspect the apartment or should they leave? And they hovered for a moment and Baruch Hashem, as you say, touched by a heavenly hand, they left. And so the very next day, my father, being very resourceful, managed to get my mother and I, again as a little baby, on a farmer's cart and horse who managed to get us across the border to Belgium. And my father reached Belgium and we stayed in Antwerp for 2 years until 1940. So by then I was just 2 practically. And I remember being hoisted onto my father's shoulders. I was wearing a siren suit, which is like a large baby grow all in one. And at that time, men also had them over their clothes. And Churchill, in fact, who was the war minister in England at that time, was also famous for the siren suit that he wore when going off to see the troops. Now, the troops were being evacuated at that point because Belgium had retreated in the face of the Nazi onslaught. And the British who had been fighting with Belgium had to be rescued. And Churchill called it the Battle of the 100 Small Ships. Any ship, hundreds of small ships, were asked to go to Dover, which was just across the English Channel from Dunkirk, where the British troops were being evacuated. And my mother said to my father, "We've missed the last boat out of the actual port of Antwerp because you wouldn't listen to me when I said the Nazis are going to follow us." So nothing unusual, is it? I don't think, when a husband's not so keen on listening to what his wife has to say. So she said, now we have to run on foot to the nearest place where there is water. Where there is water, there is hope. Where is that? Hundreds of kilometers away in Dunkirk. So there I was, bobbing up and down on my father's shoulders with my head resting on his felt grey hat. And my mother, who had a tough time catching up with my father because he was 6 foot something and she wasn't quite up to his shoulders, kept saying to him, Aaron, that was his name, "Ran nicht so fast, don't run so fast, das Kind schläft, the child is sleeping." So I knew that actually she couldn't keep up. Even at that time, I had this sense. And my father said, "Komm, Grina, komm." Her name was Regina, Esther Rochel in Ivrit, but in Germany, having to have a German name, Regina, he called her Gina. "Gina, komm, schnell, schnell, schnell." So he took no notice that I was sleeping or not sleeping. And we finally got to the beaches of Dunkirk and flopped down on the sand. What to do? So my mother saw, I don't know if anybody has seen the trailer. I only saw the trailer of the film Dunkirk. I couldn't bear it because it did show you just what I seem to remember, with the troops being en masse, being put into lines, and the officers who were dressed spick and span somehow or other, evacuating the troops onto the boats. So my mother and father got out of the sand. My father put me on his shoulders, and because they had seen a British officer, and my mother asked the British officer, "Will you take us?" But luckily she spoke English, French, German, Yiddish. So speaking English saved her. I'm trying to tell all my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, learn English. It's a very, very important language. And I've actually got a picture of my great-grandson at 4 months old on his tummy with a book of English writing and pictures in front of him. I said, wonderful. He's studying for his psychometry to get him into university. You never start too young.
4 months.
So we got there to this officer standing there, and my mother said, "Will you take us?" "Impossible, madam. We are evacuating the British troops." And off he went. We slopped down again in the sand, and then my father saw another officer, and he nudged my mother, and he said, free game in his best Yiddish. Ask him. Up we got. I was on my father's shoulders, and my mother stood in front of the officer with us. "Will you take us?" "Impossible, madam. Impossible. We're evacuating the..." And as he turned to walk away, my mother noticed that in his shiny brown leather belt was a shiny black gun, and she pulled it from his holster and held it to my head. And she said, "If you do not take us, I shoot my child, my husband before your eyes." So this poor traumatized officer managed to retrieve the gun from before it went off. Thank God, otherwise I wouldn't be here telling you this story probably.
From the tiny little woman, your mom.
Yes, exactly. He picked me up off my father's shoulders, said, Komm, schnell, quick, and dropped us deep down into a boat, and my father and mother after us, and my father's hand icy cold holding mine. Well, of course, you might remember that I managed to shake his hand loose and started singing my little song up and down, and the soldiers patting me on the head. I can still feel it. So that's how.
That's such a beautiful story.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program. My guest today is Dr. Pessy Krausz, knee Markovitz, and we are talking about what I decided to name the topic, Touched by a Heavenly Hand. You've just heard a very short part of Pessy's story, which you'll find in the podcast as well. Once she got onto that boat, she started dancing. So there she was, singing and dancing, this little girl of 2. Can you imagine what those soldiers must have felt seeing you? There must have been such joy for them to see, the livelihood, a living little child. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory said, "To be a Jew is to be part of the most remarkable story ever lived by any people, covering more countries, more adverse circumstances, more triumphs and tragedies than any other story. Every one of us has a chapter to write in that story and hand the book on. That is what it is to be a Jew." And your story is exactly that. It's a story that has to be told. And it's so beautiful. And Pessy, would you like me to read your story, Touched by a Heavenly Hand?
Yes, please.
You're nodding your head. This is Pessy wrote the story called Touched by a Heavenly Hand, and I loved it. It was when I was about 2 years old that together with my father and mother, we managed to race through Europe in 1940, specifically from Antwerp in Belgium, trying to beat the clock as the Nazis invaded. Running, I on my father's shoulders, with my mother desperately trying to keep up with her tall husband. We somehow reached the shores of Dunkirk, situated between Belgium and France. This was when Churchill, the British foreign minister, put out a call for every small, big, or medium-sized ship to set off and to rescue the British soldiers who had fought with Belgium, which capitulated. Bombs were dropping all around as the Nazi planes strapped the shores, terrifying soldiers and me and my parents. To cut to the core, we, or rather my mother, fluent not only in her mother tongue German, but also in English, persuaded a British officer whose gun she pulled from his holster. Holding it to my head, she threatened to shoot me, my father, and herself if he continued to refuse to take us on a boat. Holding me aloft, followed by my parents racing across the beach, mercifully, he dropped me deep down into the alleyway of a vessel. My father tried to hold my hand, but no. What did I do but run back and forth along it, only to be patted on the head, a very tingling feeling, by hordes of soldiers who, bemused, could not believe their eyes at seeing this little dancing, singing girl. It took my 4th-generation great-grandson to recreate a reenactment. We were all at a family event. Maybe I was a little quieter than usual, sitting on a couch, when this little 4-year-old patted me on the head as he snuggled up to me. Softer on me, he said as I melted with warmth, I love you. I felt touched by a heavenly hand that put on the head was my touch of holiness. That pat on the head was my touch of holiness. That's the most beautiful, beautiful story. You wrote it in January, the 1st of the 2nd of 2024. And it's the most beautiful, beautiful story. Pessy, just tell me what is happening at the moment in Israel. We were going to talk about when you got to the Isle of Man, but perhaps I would also like to move forward a bit. Tell me a bit about how you met, how you got to Israel. Tell me about was your husband's name Neville?
Yes. Neville
okay.
Krausz.
Tell me a bit about Neville.
Neville, actually, as a youngster, when the war, he was older than me by almost 10 years, but very young in spirit. In 1948, when the state was formed, there were many volunteers from England who got to Palestine, or Israel as it then became, in order to help to fight because it was beset by, as we know, all the Arabs who had decided they don't want us to be there. They didn't want their own state. They just didn't want Jews to have a Jewish state. So he smuggled himself onto a boat because his father and mother, he was the only son. He had a younger brother who didn't survive, and he had a law degree, but he actually was working for the B'nai Akiva and worked with his father in the cutlery factory in Sheffield in the north of England, where they made stainless steel cutlery. So his parents would have never let him go, especially at that time. He smuggled himself into the bowels of a ship. It's funny, I never thought of that. We both had a ship story. Yes. He only told his very best friend with a vow of secrecy when his parents started to worry where was he, that he could tell them once he was on his way. But his very best friend decided that he would not wait until the ship was on its way to Israel. And he went and told his parents. And suddenly the police arrived into the bowels of this ship and dragged my husband off.
Oh, my word.
And so but he was an ardent Zionist, and that when we met, we both had this dream, we must somehow get to Israel. So it took us a long time because, as I said, his father was in business together with Neville, and Neville took an increasingly greater role in the business. So finally, I would say I had also a strange story because I was a 10-year-old in 1948 and went to Cheder. Now, it was a Jewish area in London where we finally got to in Willesden, having managed to get together with other people and live in London. And so before going into the main synagogue, which was where my parents used to go and we used to go as traditional Orthodox Jews, the children had a children's service and prepared them for what would be said in the shul, the different prayers. And the person who led this was called Mr. Morris Brodie. He was the headmaster of the Cheder, which wasn't a Cheder where, it was something where you went after school to learn Ivri, after your ordinary school 3 times a week. But on Shabbat morning, he took the service. And he was very cool, calm. On one particular morning, he rushed in, very flustered, very pink, and he said, Children, stand up. Today a miracle has occurred. Today we have a country of our own. Oh, well, we stood up, we scraped our little chairs behind our little desks, and we stood up. And then he said, now we have to sing Le Moladati. So there we sang, Le Moladati, Hevedoti, Alyam Galim Baketev, Ya Futran Mayik, Aniyati, and so on and so forth. And then he said, and now you have to sing the Hatikva. Oh, we all stood there and we sang, Kolot Balevo Penima, and so on. So then what has happened? We have a country of our own. We have a country. So I couldn't understand it. I thought I was in my own country after all we'd been through. I rushed to my parents. I said, Mummy and Daddy, listen, Mr. Brodie said we have a country of our own. Isn't this our country? And they said, no, this is not our country. This is the country which has been good enough to take us in. But we now have our own country. I said, well, where is it? Oh, they said it's a far, far away. Far away. It's very hot and dusty. And it's called Israel now. So I said, well, when are we going? When are we going to our own country? And they said, well, we've taken such a long time getting used to being settled here. It's very hard. The work is hard. The language is hard. The culture is hard. And we cannot start again.
We're going to get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on 101.9 High FM radio on the Finding Human program. My guest today is Dr. Pessy Krausz, and we are talking about her remarkable journey from, it was actually Leipzig to Israel, to London via Isle of Man, an amazing story. And at the moment, she's telling me a story about when Israel was founded in 1948. She was 10 years old and singing the songs. I mean, that's very moving. I'm back with you again. Go on, please, Pessy.
Yes. So from that moment on, I decided that I'm going to go one day from that moment. And, you know, you did ask me, you did mention in some of the ideas that you thought we might talk about was as a psychotherapist, which I am today, Baruch Hashem, what sort of like, tips would I give, so to speak, in coping? How do people, are there tips to cope? Well, the thing is this, that I think that when I was a little girl, and I think all of us when we are children, we might have a moment when something gives us a spark of courage or a spark of encouragement. It might be a person. It might be B'nai Akiva. It might be flowers, enjoying nature. But something gives you something which fills your inner batteries and makes you motivated to do something with the batteries, with the energy from the batteries which have been filled. And so I think my batteries were filled at that point to say, I'm going to Israel, but I'm always going to try to do something which when I get there will be useful, will help to build the country. And that's why the studies that I undertook were those studies rather than music, art and drama, which I actually loved.
You could have easily done, yeah. It's very interesting what you say, that, with the whispers to the soul really is what you're talking about. And Elie Wiesel said, religion is not man's relationship to God. It is man's relationship to man. And what you are saying is exactly that. You wanted to know how, you tried to see how you could help others. That's been your life motto, I think, hasn't it? And that was one of the stories that I did ask you. One of the things was being a psychotherapist. Yes. What can you do in those situations? So go on. So then when did you meet Neville?
So I met Neville through a rabbi who had been the rabbi in Sheffield where Neville was. And he came to London to be the rabbi of the shul, one of the shuls that were in the vicinity of Willesden. There were 3 shuls. And so I decided I'm going to go along to this rabbi's shul, Rabbi Ben-Zion Lapian. Well, when Rabbi Ben-Zion Lapian stood up and spoke, you could hear the walls shake. And this little shul that was practically empty before he arrived became absolutely packed. And he was an ardent Zionist. And he related once when we were speaking actually on one of the Parshat HaShavua, he said, in Israel, he said, actually leaves grow through the cracks of the wall. Oranges grow from nothing. And if I open the orange and look at it, I can see the blood of my brethren, and we have to live and we have to build up Israel wherever we are. And of course, this remarkable man not only introduced Neville and I, but he was offered a job in Jerusalem, originally in charge of a washateria, where people go, they have these machines to do your washing. And, students who don't have their own washing machines, and they can do their washing in these washing machines. And he said, I would rather be the menahel, in charge of a washateria, than to be a rabbi in England. Well, eventually, he was given a very prestigious position in Dvar Yerushalayim, in a wonderful, wonderful yeshiva. But that was Rabbi Lapjan who introduced Neville and I. So that was a real bracha. That was
absolutely.
A bracha.
Absolutely. And then what was your age when you got married? You say that Neville was 10 years older than you. So how old were you when you got married?
When we met, it was immediate magic. And so he said to me, he said, I'm 29, but only just. And I said, well, I'm 19, but nearly 20. And that was it. And 3 months later, we got married.
What did your parents think of him?
Oh, they just fell for Neville. He fell for my mother's potato latkes, and of course she played the piano like a dream, and she sang. So my mother studied opera. Actually in Dresden, where she was born. But of course, she was from a religious family, and she could not go on the stage and perform because it would mean breaking the Shabbat. But she would sit at the piano and play. Now, you did mention at the beginning how things are in Israel today. And I'm sure that you know that for our remarkable army, which is giving so many korbanot, so many sacrifices in order to win this battle of iron wills, really, we managed to rescue 2 hostages yesterday. These 2 hostages have been reunited with their families. And in Israel today, it is a bittersweet existence. Because on the one hand, we are coping with losses. My grandson, one of my grandsons, has been to 4 funerals of his friends. Another grandson who was in the engineering corps, I must tell you this, he has just been released after 3 months in Gaza. He is the father of 3 little children, and there's one on the way. And we had a Thanksgiving party for him at my son's home, son and daughter-in-law, so that we were all together. And I sort of fell around his neck. I was so emotional. And he said in my ear, he said, Safta Omi, I said, what you've done for us is so wonderful. He was setting off the explosives with detonators. He said, no, it's not what I've done for you that's remarkable. It's what you've done for me. I said, what have I done for you? He said, it's your courage, your parents' courage. And also his mother, her parents, family Schlesinger, escaped as well with the remarkable stories from Hungary and Czechoslovakia. He said, you and my grandparents, they're the ones that have given me the courage and given us all the courage to fight for you. And I haven't written about that. I don't think I've shared it till this very moment, Sue. But
that actually makes me very tearful because, that we often talk about intergenerational trauma, but look at those lessons that are learnt in that intergenerational journey of the Jews, that your grandson can say that to you, that's where he's getting his courage and his resilience from. How absolutely remarkable.
Yes. So, and I think, that is what we are going through. And I think the world is with us. I didn't catch your actual grandchildren, but I saw this fantastic demonstration that was made, in South Africa. And you said it was in your area. I was so moved.
My grandchildren's school. It was at King David Linksfield High School. And I must admit, I really did look. I wasn't sure if it was the high school and the junior school together, because there were a lot of children, but they certainly sang Am Yisrael Chai with such passion. Wasn't that wonderful?
And the waving the flags and seeing their faces glow. I feel that you are all with us, all giving us a great deal of encouragement. You can't all physically be here. I know that. I mean, because we have still family abroad, but you are with us emotionally. And I know in South Africa, you're going through tough times. So I want to send you Am Yisrael Chai. You also are part of our history, and you also will succeed and overcome, because all that we have to do is to be together. And I think that is another great clue to what gives us all strength. We pick up the phone, speak to a friend, meet. You can be in a knitting club, a writing club, a book club, join a club, a gardening club, or whatever it is, to gather together and share and not feel alone. I think that is so important. And that's, perhaps just a simple thing that we can all share together.
And I think your advice is really so welcome, because without doubt, the diaspora Jews, I can speak for myself, we are feeling guilt. A lot of my friends, I would say most of my friends, have family in Israel. And we are so torn between being here with our other family, being there and seeing what's going on in Israel. And of course, I'm on every single news site imaginable. And it's very frightening. But at the same time, I realize the connections is so important. We're going to get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. My guest today is Dr. Pessy Krausz, and you will hear that we're talking. She was telling me about the people, hostages who were released yesterday. When you actually hear our program, it will already be a week later, because we are doing a pre-record. Now, Pessy, we were talking about how important community is and connecting with one another. Being there for each other, I think, is so important in this time. It's part of that resilience that we're all being asked to tap into at the moment. Now, when you eventually we're going back a bit, but when you eventually got to Israel, you said that I think your grandson was there first. Is that right?
No, my brother was there first. Okay. Oh, yes, my son was there first of all, my brother was there first.
He was 16, didn't you say, when he left?
My son, yes. My son left Sheffield, my eldest son. In England, he was called Simon, but here it's called Shimon, named after a rabbi great-grandfather from Hungary. And he said, when he was 16, he said that he would like to be a more knowledgeable Jew, not just a practicing Jew, because in Sheffield, the Jewish education was not very broad, to put it mildly. And so off he went. And he managed to get into what was at the time, very well thought of, yeshiva high school with a pnimiyah where you could live in, called Nativ Meir. And that was in September when I came to see him, and he had no relatives at all. And when I came to see him, Hanukkah time, which was 3 months later, he had filled 12 exercise books with tiny little catching up on all the work that he was trying to do. And I said to him, listen, you better come back to England. This is much too tough for you. He was pale and he was thin and, oh no, he said, I'm sticking it out. This is my place. I'll manage. And really, he really was the trigger that I said to my husband, right, now you'll have to tell Dad, my father-in-law, that's it. We're off next year, no matter what. So my father-in-law, he really said, well, you know what? You go with my blessing because it's a wonderful thing that Shimon, named after his own father, is now setting the path. He was an ardent Zionist as well, my father-in-law. I mean, there are amazing stories about he actually landed in the sea trying to get to Israel at one point when the plane ran out of petrol. But that's another story.
So many beautiful stories of the heavenly touch, quite honestly, Pessy.
That's right.
So then you got to Israel. Now, you told me about your grandson coming out. And is that Noam that you're talking about?
No, my son who came, his eldest son is called Noam.
Yes.
And that grandson.
He was a reserve paratrooper, is that right?
That's quite right. He was. And he was the one who actually, I have got another published story about him and my other grandson, Aaron, because he used to have chats with me. He's got a lovely wife, and Bezrat Hashem, she's now expecting a baby. It seems this war is also creating a baby boom.
It is really wonderful.
And he was the grandson who said to me, and I wrote it in the story, Savta Omi, this is not just a war of civilizations. It's not just a war of existence. It is a worldwide war of Jewish identity. And we are all being touched by who we are as Jews worldwide. And Israel is the trigger for that. And we're fighting for our Jewish identity in our own country. So
it is an existential war without doubt. And we have to dedicate everything we say to the IDF. Their strength, they're not only fighting for Israel's survival, they're fighting for the diaspora Jews' survival as well. And I can read a bit of the tale. If people want to look it up, they can. It's called Soldiers' Tales, and it's by Pessy Krausz. And she says, grandson, reserve paratrooper Noam, visited me with his young wife, Shira, explaining while tea vapors steamed up his sturdy army black frame glasses through lenses, intent grey eyes focused, reaching my heart with his explanation. And he said, we focus on our mission, motivations high, trainings professional, not only physical, but spiritual. As with Kavanah, we pray sincerely, intent on every word we say. The family boosts our morale when you send us special night torches we fix to our helmets. So we see in the dark, 60 pairs of socks, special pressure plasters so feet don't get sore. It helps you there. Keep sending parcels of nosh, crisps, cakes, Coca-Cola, make sleeping sounder on fields rough ground. Our life's no feather bed. We're fighting a war for Jewish identity. And then you go on and you say, what a surprise, comes knocking at my door, a uniformed soldier. Met him before? My younger grandson, nicknamed Aharoni, intelligence unit, gave him a furlough. Came to visit me with Efrat, his mom. His brown eyes shine at my surprised delight. It's so beautiful. Grandsons, they're up in the north, down in the south. The Iron Dome's all the while being deployed. A Nobel Prize contender, supposedly. If so, better give it to our boys, each one a noble defender of our only land, our home. Say no to vulnerability, yes to positivity and unity. And you go on writing. It's so beautiful, Pessy. So now just fill me in. So who is Aharoni?
Aaron is named after my father. And he is, yes, and he is the son of my third son, we have three sons, and Daniel and Ephrat live in Ephrat, and their eldest son has a family. He's too old already to go in the army, and they have two daughters, and then they have three sons, and Aaron is the youngest. And he actually was finished. He is in the program, which is called Hesder. It's part army and part yeshiva studies. So he was actually demobbed altogether. And then suddenly he is called back. And he is sometimes on night duty for 8 to 10 hours and watching, and the information that he gathers is given to the Mankal, to the people who are running the war. Yes. Chezi Halevi and all those people. And they visit that unit. Yes, near Beersheba. They visit it regularly to gather information which cannot be given in any other way but personally by word of mouth. It's top secret. And so there he is, this gentle lad. He likes playing Fur Elise on his piano thing and studying in the yeshiva. There he is in uniform, losing weight because by the time he finishes his shift, it's breakfast. He's too tired. He can't eat breakfast. He goes to sleep, has supper, and goes back on to. But he said, doesn't worry him. I said, but
yeah, we are actually being told to wrap up, Pessy, but you and I have got so much still to talk about. We didn't even nearly finish. But let me just say that, honestly, our blessings go to all your grandsons, your granddaughters, everyone, all the IDF, all the people that I know also who are in the IDF, who are not killers, but are having to go into the most terrible situations and be killers, and we're not. We're as a people, we are people loving. We love children, we love babies. So for our IDF to be looking at the devastation that is happening in Gaza and still having to go on fighting so that we as a nation can survive is an incredible sacrifice that they are making. And Pessy, how would you like to end?
Well, I'd like to say that it is not a sacrifice. It is a dedication, actually.
You're right.
Yes. And I'd like to say that I wouldn't actually use the word killers because they are defenders. When they fire a gun, they know that it's defending us, and they know that if not, the blood would be spilled. They would be all over Israel. We would be lost, and nobody would have our own country, which Jews from all over the world can come. And so I would say that we are all proud of them. Thank you so much, Sue, really, for your wonderful dedication to the IDF of this program.
But I think you're so right. I used the wrong words there. They are defenders. They're defenders of Israel. They're defenders of the diaspora Jews. And what can I say? You and I both just feel very tearful when we actually even think about it. But Pessy, this is not the end of our programs. I'm being told to wrap up, but we're going to get back again. But I just wanted to tell people that there is finding meaning in suffering. It's going to be on at the David Lapati Center. If you want to know more about it, it's how we are faced have to search for meaning in the face of challenges. I'm actually going to be talking there as well. And it's on the 28th of February, 2024 at 19:30 to 20:45 at the David Lapata Center. 50 Rand per head. If you want to know more about it, please go on to social services at jhbchev.co.za. It's the Chevra Kadisha Social Services. And Pessy, thank you once more, and may all our soldiers be blessed, and may all of you in Israel stay safe.
Thank you, and Am Yisrael Chai.